Diddy, you know Diddy?
Diddy,
one of my best friends.
Okay.
Right? Okay. When you want to be a Kappa, you want to be Kappa, you want to be Alpha, whatever the it is, okay? We're gonna haze you and haze you and haze you until you are a Kappa. That's what happened. People sold their souls to Diddy.
He walked into the courtroom with eyes steady and shoulders squared. No longer the child star we once knew, but a man holding evidence that could bring down one of music's most powerful empires. Orlando Brown's secret recordings weren't just audio files, they were potential keys to a case that has left Hollywood holding its breath. The shocking subpoena. The Los Angeles courtroom fell silent when the news broke. Orlando Brown, the former TV star whose wild ups and downs have dominated headlines.
Trying to kill me. You know, Diddy and Jay-Z, Auntie Sean and Auntie Yolanda. No matter how many contracts you try to take out on my life, no matter how many times you try to threaten my family or threaten people to stay away from me, no matter how many things you try to do to me and how many things you've tried to do to me, it ain't working. Don't play with somebody that you know got the...
Officially accepted a federal subpoena to testify against Sean Diddy Combs.
I literally took one sip of my beverage and the whole side of my face felt like I had a stroke.
Court documents confirmed what many thought impossible. Brown is now a key witness for the prosecution, and he's not coming empty-handed. What makes this testimony explosive isn't just who Brown is, but what he allegedly captured. Secret voice memos from not one, not two, but 3 separate weekends spent at properties tied to Diddy. According to Brown's legal team, these recordings weren't accidental. They were methodical.
I got on a plane at 5:30 a.m. So at this party, I think half the people there were butt naked.
Captured on a second phone he kept hidden and on airplane mode, only turning it on briefly to document what he was witnessing. The cold metal of that second phone must have felt heavy in his pocket.
Well, it's not up to me. It's up to Mr. Combs, and I don't see it happening.
Why?
Because he believes he's innocent. He believes he's innocent. And what's more, he believes that he needs to stand up, not just for himself, for his family, and for everybody who's been targeted by the federal government.
As he navigated those hallways, recording everything from guest movements to staff activities in the late hours. Federal agents now claim these audio files contain metadata that perfectly matches wireless router logs they already possessed. Even more damning, Brown's phone identifier appears in those restricted areas exactly when he claimed to be there. Did you know that digital metadata can include not just time and location, but also unique device identifiers that are nearly impossible to falsify? This digital fingerprint may be what gives Brown's recordings their potential power in court. But the question hanging over this testimony remains: why would a former TV star risk everything to testify against one of music's most influential figures? The answer might lie in what he claims those recordings contain. The voice memos that changed everything. North Wing, Second Corridor. These whispered words from Brown's first voice memo, time-stamped at 1 a.m., set the prosecution's case in motion. What followed was faint radio chatter, and then the phrase that would become central to this case.
Well, Bill and Sade, accepting a plea agreement would mean that Sean Combs would have to admit to trafficking and forced. And today he made it very clear that was not going to happen. Diddy maintained all along these encounters involved consenting adults and plans to take his chances that a jury agrees.
Heartbeat reset. Prosecutors froze the audio at that exact moment and displayed a matching router log on the courtroom screen.
Isn't that, to my mind, that's one of the bigger hurdles in selecting a jury this coming week, is that there is, at least anecdotally, when I talk to people, they have that opinion, strongly held opinion, that there's celebrity tapes, that they've kind of conflated Epstein, and you mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell and all of these things into Diddy. There's this idea that somehow this is Epstein redux or something.
That log showed Brown's phone briefly connecting to an access point called guest APN2, sending a file header before going dark again. The synchronization was precise. Too precise, they argued, to be coincidental. Brown allegedly tracked everything methodically: who entered the guest wing, what staff was doing after midnight, even hallway movements that seemed suspicious. What makes these recordings particularly compelling is how they align with other evidence prosecutors already had. Digital spreadsheets from ex-security boss Roger Bonds and smart lighting logs showing lights being manually turned off during the night. The whispered urgency in Brown's voice carries through these recordings. You can almost hear his breathing quicken when doors open or when radio chatter increases. This isn't just audio. It's a real-time documentation of what he claims was happening behind closed doors. The most shocking revelation? Prosecutors say these memos even caught security radio chatter using code phrases that allegedly signaled when surveillance was being temporarily altered. The metallic click of doors cycling and the subtle dimming of hallway lights form the backdrop to Brown's narration, creating an audio map of the estate's most private corridors.
What made you come here to support Puff?
I'm supporting Puff because he's innocent, and I'm wholeheartedly believing his innocence, and I know he's innocent. So,
Well, you said you know he's innocent.
1,000%.
But were these recordings just desperate attempts by Brown to gain leverage? Or did he genuinely capture evidence of concerning activities? The defense would argue the former, but
Mr. Combs feels A, he's innocent, which is why he's not going to plead guilty. B, he's going to be truthful about this case because he wants to portray that to the people who have loved him his whole life. And I think he also feels an obligation to people in general. Maybe it's Black people, maybe it's white people, maybe it's anybody who's ever felt aggrieved and targeted by the government. He feels an obligation to those people to say, you know what, maybe I can break the model. Maybe I can show the world that a Black man can win, in federal court. And I think he probably is the only person I know of who might be able to actually accomplish that.
But the metadata tells a different story. The forensic evidence. When digital forensics expert Lynn Rivas took the stand, the trial shifted from speculation to science. Rivas methodically explained to the jury how her team cloned the internal drive of Brown's secret phone, generated a hash value, essentially a digital fingerprint, and created a forensically sound copy they could analyze without altering the original.
And when the judge did, Diddy, who was sitting at the defense table with his attorneys, did not show any signs of emotion. He took a sip of water before he was led out of the courtroom by the U.S. Marshals. Now, his lawyers have vowed to fight this. They are going to be back in court on Wednesday before the judge who will oversee this trial and try to get Diddy to be released.
The defense tried to challenge this process, questioning whether there could have been preset editing on the device before it reached authorities. Rivas didn't hesitate in her response. Deep waveform analysis revealed no splices, no edits, and no manipulation. The audio file's time codes synchronized perfectly with the phone's operating system logs, a consistency that's nearly impossible to fake. Did you know that professional audio forensics can detect edits as short as 15 milliseconds by analyzing the sound wave patterns? Even the most sophisticated editing software leaves microscopic traces that experts can identify. The courtroom display showed the visual representation of Brown's voice patterns alongside timestamps from the phone's internal clock, both matching precisely. This wasn't just a recording, it was a digital time capsule with its seal unbroken. Dr. Maya Chen, a signal analysis expert, further strengthened the prosecution's case by testifying that background sound fingerprints, from ventilation hum to faint music, matched across all three of Brown's memos.
As far as jury selection goes, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that Both sides expect to have all of this done in the matter of 3 days. Now, given just how high profile this trial is, I was kind of stunned that they seem very confident that they will be able to seat a jury in that amount of time.
This consistency, she explained, proves the clips were all made in the same wing of the estate.
What happens is if people go into a trial believing the firepower on the prosecution is so strong, I mean, let's say on a scale of 1 to 100, it's a 95 that it's so strong, but it goes down to an 88. That helps the defense because everybody goes in thinking, wow, they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and all of a sudden, none of it's there. I think that actually helps the defense.
When defense attorney Matthew Hartley challenged her, suggesting similar audio patterns could come from different hallways, Chen explained that while vent noise might repeat, the combined acoustic signature of echo, music bleed, and HVAC rhythm pinpointed a specific location. The warm amber glow of the courtroom screens illuminated the jurors' faces as they watched the synchronized evidence.
Last hearing before Sean Combs' trial starts, when he walked into federal court today, he appeared to be looking for his family. They've pretty much been at all of the hearings that I've been to, but there was no presence of his sons or his mother or his sister who had previously been at those hearings.
Do you still think that, because there is this public perception, that there are celebrity tapes involved in this case?
No.
Do you still think that there are minors involved in this case?
I'm certain no.
Router logs blinking in time with audio peaks, all aligned with precision that seemed to tell its own story. The code behind closed doors. Heartbeat reset. These two words emerged as the central mystery of the case. According to prosecutors, this wasn't just casual terminology. It was code for when doors were cycling and cameras were temporarily dimmed. The phrase appears multiple times across Brown's recordings, always followed by system changes in the estate's security network. When prosecutors played the second voice memo, time-stamped just after 3 a.m., Brown could be heard quietly describing corridor lights, shifting to a dim red pulse he called a running heartbeat. The prosecution then revealed a visual bombshell.
Back up a little bit, please.
How can you support your father? How do you support him moving forward?
A still shot from a motion-triggered camera in a nearby maintenance hallway, showing a housekeeper pushing a cart labeled Refresh, with a timestamp landing less than a minute after the radio chatter in Brown's recording.
Trial, Combs will ditch the jail garb and wear ordinary clothes, as his lawyers argue the evidence shows consenting adults being intimate in their own way.
We have the latest from federal court in the Sean Combs criminal case. Status of jury selection, what Diddy's going to be wearing, violation of a gag order, rejecting a plea offer.
Building automation engineer Tyler Blake confirmed that maintenance logs showed 4 manual lighting overrides that weekend, all in the guest wing, each dimming the lights for exactly 6 minutes. What made these overrides suspicious, Blake testified, was that they lacked the explanatory memo notes that normally accompanied such changes. The defense tried to minimize these connections, with attorney Hartley reading from a housekeeping guide that described a heartbeat glow as simply a fancy lighting feature. But prosecutors quickly clarified the difference between a constant ambient setting and the manual overrides captured in the system logs.
Is stacked against him. They've got a ton of evidence. Take the plea deal, dude. Just take it.
Well, my guess is that, because we don't know the deal of the plea deal. At least I don't think we do.
True.
Okay.
Did you know that high-end smart home systems can store years of operational data, including who accessed controls, what changes were made, and exact timestamps for each action? This digital trail can be nearly impossible to erase completely. The sound of Brown's voice in the recordings carries a tense undercurrent as he describes the changing lighting conditions. The soft, crimson pulse reflecting off mirror panels, casting shadows that seem to move on their own. This sensory detail made his testimony not just evidence, but an immersive window into what he claims he witnessed.
The decision guarantees Combs will face trial beginning just 4 days from now that will test whether one of music's most prolific figures used his power, wealth, and fame to exploit both women and men for decades.
Still here? That means this story matters to you too. If you haven't yet, please tap subscribe. It would mean the world to me as we uncover even more about how this case could reshape the entertainment industry forever.
Elaborate, sometimes days-long parties by coercing victims through drugs, threats, and manipulation. They claim to have video evidence, and some of the accusations echo details from over 70 civil lawsuits filed against Combs over the last 30 years.
A cooperation deal with consequences. The stakes for Orlando Brown couldn't be higher.
Major developments tonight involving the case against Sean Diddy Combs, what he decided in court today, and what this now means, the move coming just 4 days before his trial is set to begin. Here's Aaron Katursky.
Under his cooperation agreement with prosecutors, Brown could receive significant leniency in an unrelated Nevada firearm case, but only if he tells the complete truth. The agreement explicitly states that if he lies or even bends the truth, any shot at leniency vanishes immediately. This double-edged arrangement became central to both sides' arguments. Prosecutors pointed to this clause as proof that Brown has every incentive to be accurate and truthful in his testimony. The defense flipped this interpretation, claiming it shows he's simply desperate to save himself and would say anything to secure that deal. When Brown took the stand, defense attorney Hartley went hard at this vulnerability, highlighting old media interviews where Brown gave conflicting information about events. The sharp, accusatory tone of the questioning filled the courtroom as Hartley tried to paint Brown as inconsistent and unreliable. But Brown fired back with unexpected composure, distinguishing between casual talk in interviews and sworn testimony backed by contemporaneous recordings. "I'm here to tell it straight, not to cut deals," he told the jury, his voice steady despite the pressure. The weight of Brown's past public struggles hung in the air. His battles with substance abuse, his erratic interviews, his legal troubles. But in that moment on the stand, he projected a different energy. Focused, determined, and with nothing left to lose. Did you know that cooperation agreements typically require substantial assistance in the prosecution of another person, not just testimony?
Sean Combs makes it official. He's rejecting the government's offer to plead guilty and spare himself the possibility of a prolonged term in prison. When asked if he turned down the offer, Combs answered, "Yes, I do, Your Honor," as he stood in a baggy beige jail uniform. Terms were not disclosed, but prosecutors did say a plea could result in a shorter sentence for Combs than if he's convicted.
Federal trafficking, racketeering, and charges beginning Monday morning.
The defendant must provide information that significantly helps the government's case to receive sentencing benefits. When a short voicemail recovered from Brown's second phone was played,
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs back behind bars, a magistrate judge denying him bail, saying that there were no conditions that she could conceive of that would make her confident that he would appear again for other court appearances. The judge saying, "My concern is this is a crime that happens behind closed doors."
A staff coordinator saying, "We'll have the heartbeat upgraded and ready." The connection between Brown's recordings and the prosecution's broader evidence became harder to dismiss. The tangy scent of tension filled the courtroom as both sides recognized how much hinged on whether the jury found Brown credible, despite his complicated past. Diddy's defense strategy. As the prosecution built their case around Brown's recordings, Diddy's defense team constructed a counter-narrative. Sean Diddy Combs, sitting at the defense table in a baggy beige jail uniform, had already made a critical decision by rejecting the government's plea offer, answering simply, "Yes, I do, Your Honor," when asked if he was turning it down. This wasn't a case of admission, his team argued, but one of misinterpretation. Defense attorney Matthew Hartley consistently portrayed the estate operations as normal for any high-end property catering to VIP guests. The changing linens, the door sensor pings, the shifting light settings, all business as usual in luxury hospitality, not evidence of something sinister. To counter Brown's recordings and the prosecution's technical evidence, the defense announced plans to bring in both a hospitality consultant and an automation systems executive. These experts would testify that luxury estates often turn off hallway cameras to protect guest privacy, and that linen service receipts were perfectly normal for high-end events.
Be such a massive trial, like maybe the biggest Hollywood trial. God knows which way it's going to go. Is it going to go on for weeks and months?
For sure.
Did you know that premium hospitality services for ultra-high net worth individuals often include specialized protocols that would seem unusual to the average person? Everything from soundproofing techniques to privacy measures follows different standards when catering to celebrity clients. Throughout cross-examination of prosecution witnesses, Hartley maintained a consistent theme. The evidence being presented showed everyday logistics being blown out of proportion. When challenging Dr. Chen's acoustic analysis, when questioning engineer Blake about lighting controls, the defense hammered home their central argument, that this was a state operation being misconstrued, not evidence of wrongdoing. The cool confidence with which Hartley cross-examined witnesses suggested a defense team that believed in their strategy. Rather than attacking Brown's character directly, they focused on creating reasonable doubt about the interpretation of his evidence. A subtle but significant distinction that could influence how jurors processed the testimony. The courtroom showdown, Judge Aaron Suberman-Manian wasn't wasting time. With Brown's testimony scheduled for the second week of the prosecution's case, the judge lined up a short hearing to examine the chain of custody for the recordings and ensure proper procedures were followed. His firm voice echoed through the courtroom as he warned both sides to keep their technical arguments focused and relevant. Inside the courtroom, two radically different narratives were taking shape. The prosecution's strategy centered on playing Brown's audio memos in chronological order, matching them with synchronized network visuals, door sensor activations, and lighting shifts that moved in real time with his voice. This multimedia presentation aimed to create an undeniable pattern that jurors couldn't ignore. The defense countered with their hospitality expert, who testified that luxury estates operate under different protocols than standard properties. Privacy is paramount for high-profile guests, he explained, suggesting that what prosecutors portrayed as suspicious was simply high-end service. The most dramatic moment came during Brown's cross-examination, when Hartley pressed him on his Nevada cooperation agreement, suggesting he was sweet-talking the court for his own benefit. Brown replied with unexpected directness, "The deal gets thrown out if I lie. Why would I risk that? I'm not here cutting deals. I'm here because what I saw needs to be addressed." The packed gallery shifted uncomfortably, the wooden benches creaking under the weight of spectators leaning forward to catch every word. You could almost feel the jury weighing not just the evidence, but Brown's demeanor as he withstood intense questioning. Did you know that jurors often cite a witness's behavior on the stand as more influential in their decision-making than the actual content of testimony? Nonverbal cues and how someone responds under pressure can significantly impact credibility assessments. As testimony continued, both sides hurried to stay on schedule. Prosecutors announced they would wrap their case shortly after Brown's testimony concluded. The defense remained tight-lipped about whether Combs himself would take the stand, a decision that could dramatically influence the jury, but would also expose him to cross-examination. The sharp click of the judge's gavel punctuated each day's proceedings as the trial marched forward. with closing arguments scheduled for early the following month. The ripple effect. Across the industry, beyond the courtroom walls, the impact of Brown's testimony was already reshaping the entertainment industry. Major talent agencies began quietly rewriting their event safety protocols, now demanding transparent phone policies, real-time exit options for guests, and third-party representatives who could document concerns without seeking permission. One of the top private event insurers announced it was revamping policies, adding new questions about door locking mechanisms, lighting control access, and staff communication systems. The crisp pages of these new contracts reflected an industry forced to reckon with its own shadows. In a significant development, lawmakers added Brown's name to the witness list for upcoming hearings on the proposed Creative Industry Guest Safety Act, legislation aimed at funding anonymous reporting systems for guests and establishing minimum training standards for security personnel at large events. Did you know that approximately 87% of entertainment industry workers report having witnessed concerning behavior at private industry events, but felt they had no safe way to document or report it? This case could potentially create new standards for accountability. Performer advocacy groups publicly applauded Brown for stepping forward, issuing statements that his actions demonstrated how personal documentation could serve as a critical safety measure when official systems failed. This case proves that personal evidence gathering may sometimes be the only recourse for those in vulnerable positions. One statement read, "The cool blue light of phone screens illuminated faces across Hollywood as industry professionals followed the trial updates, many privately wondering what changes might come to an industry long accustomed to operating behind closed doors. Some production companies began proactively implementing new guest safety protocols, not waiting for the verdict or legislation to force their hand. Whatever the jury ultimately decides, Brown's recordings have already accomplished something significant, forcing a conversation about power, accountability, and safety in spaces where influence has traditionally operated unchecked. What happens next? As the trial nears its conclusion, all eyes remain fixed on the federal courthouse, where Orlando Brown's voice memos have become central to a case that could redefine boundaries in the entertainment industry. The prosecution's narrative presents a methodical documentation of concerning patterns, synchronized evidence that forms what they call an undeniable timeline of suspicious activity. The defense continues fighting to contextualize this evidence, arguing that luxury estate operations naturally include privacy measures that, viewed through a suspicious lens, can appear nefarious. Their experts have testified that what prosecutors call code words are simply industry terminology for high-end service protocols. With closing arguments approaching, the jury will soon face their most challenging task, determining whether the evidence forms a pattern too precise to be coincidental, or if it represents everyday operations being misconstrued by an opportunistic witness. Beyond this specific case, the precedent being established could reshape how power operates in entertainment spaces. If Brown's recordings are accepted as valid evidence, it could encourage others to document concerning situations, potentially shifting the balance of power in an industry where silence has long been the norm. The heavy wooden doors of the courtroom will soon close for deliberation, but regardless of the verdict, something has already changed. A former TV star's decision to secretly record what concerned him has sparked a re-examination of practices long accepted without question. For those watching this case unfold, from industry executives to aspiring artists to everyday fans, the message resonates beyond the legal arguments. In a world where power imbalances exist, sometimes the most important evidence comes from those who decide to document what they witness, even when no one asked them to. If this case has captured your attention and you want to stay informed as it continues to unfold, hit that like button, subscribe, drop a comment below, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. The story isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning.